typical hunter-gatherer would walk from Los Angeles to New York City every year. We're mismatched to being inactive. Just a moderate amount of physical activity, just 150 minutes a week, which boils down to 21 minutes a day, lowers your all-cause risk of death by approximately 30%. In almost all of the studies, the exercise has more of an effect than taking a pharmaceutical. For millions and millions of years, our ancestors had to be physically active in order to survive. And now we have to choose to be physically active. And humans are unusually fat creatures. Whenever there's any extra energy, it goes into fat.
Hey, just a really quick note to say thank you so much to all of our new subscribers. And if you haven't yet subscribed, why not? It means you're the first to know about brand new episodes of High Performance, and it also means we can attract incredible new guests to the show. So please hit subscribe right now. Enjoy the show. Well, Dan, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
What is your definition of high performance?
Well, I study how and why humans evolved to be physically active. So I think instead of focusing on elite athletes and people who win stuff, I'm actually just interested in how and why average everyday people can do really quite remarkable, decent physical activity. So it doesn't have to be running a marathon, although pretty much anybody can if they train. So for me, high performance is really just about achieving your goals and just staying fit, staying active.
And why is it important for us to have this kind of conversation?
Because we're in a world where machines have replaced human labor, and for millions and millions of years, our ancestors had to be physically active in order to survive. And that's woven into our biology. And now we have to choose to be physically active. We have to do this weird thing called exercise, which is to engage in discretionary, voluntary physical activity for the sake of health and fitness, which nobody did until very recently. But it's important for health. So we now have to find ways to encourage each other and and help each other stay active so that we can stay healthy.
And I'm well aware that people that are tuning into this have got a myriad of podcasts to listen to, hundreds of social media accounts based on fitness and health and trying to find your own optimum performance.
There's a lot I hate.
I bet you do. I thought you might. There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of challenges for people. So where is the best place for us to start? I guess it's not regarding optimum performance, but where's the best place for us to begin this conversation that would carry most value, you think, to our audience?
Well, maybe let's start with the basic epidemiological evidence, right? So large-scale studies of millions of people, right, in America, England, elsewhere, which show that just a moderate amount of physical activity, just 150 minutes a week, which boils down to 21 minutes a day, lowers your all-cause risk of death at a given age by approximately 30%, which is massive, right? There is no thing you can do that has as much benefit. And of course, if you do more, you get yet more benefit. Of course, it tails off at a certain point. So just even a moderate amount of physical activity, doesn't have to be, running the London Marathon or whatever. Just a moderate amount of physical activity has enormous benefits for physical and also mental health. I think that's probably the most important thing that everybody needs to know. So, and just a little bit is better than none. Again, another fact, breast cancer, right?
Yeah.
A concern that we all have. Colon cancer. You can lower an average person who exercises something like 150 minutes a week, right? Just going for a brisk walk can lower their lifetime risk of breast or colon cancer by somewhere between 30 and 60%, depending upon which study you're looking at. I mean, that's massive, right? You can lower your risk of Alzheimer's by 40 to 50%. Heart disease, diabetes, all these chronic diseases that cost lives and money and misery. Just moderate levels of physical activity have enormous benefits, and so I think that's the place to start.
Yeah,
we never evolved not to be active, and we pay a huge price for being persistently sedentary.
So why are we persistently sedentary? Because it feels to me like you hear that said once by you, and that should be on the front page of every newspaper. It should be the first story on every news bulletin in the evening. It's like we're all looking to live longer and be healthier. Here's an answer. Yet it seems a real challenge for people to do it.
Well, So the reason why I called my book Exercised is that we make people exercised about exercise. We make them anxious and whatever. Because we tell people if they don't exercise, there's something wrong with them, right? They're lazy, they're deficient in some way. But the important thing to realize, again, is that, remember, exercise is this discretionary, voluntary physical activity for the sake of health and fitness that we never evolved to do, because for millions of years, I mean, literally millions of years, until just, a few generations ago in places like the UK or the US, and still for many people around the world, people have to be very physically active, but they're also struggling to get enough food. They're struggling to get enough energy. And when you're struggling to get enough calories because you're working very hard to get enough to feed yourself and your family, I went for a 5-mile run this morning around Regent's Park. I spent about 500 calories doing that run. That would have been a completely stupid thing to do if I was struggling to get enough food, right? That's energy that I couldn't spend on helping my family. Right? Yeah. So we evolved to avoid physical activity when it wasn't necessary or wasn't rewarding. Right? That's a fundamental adaptation. So, I always talk about when you go to an airport or a tube stop or whatever, and there's an escalator and a stairway, right? It's even though there were no escalators in the Paleolithic, right? It's an instinct to take the escalator because it saves energy. Right?
Well, I know I came here today. I knew I was talking to you, so I took the stairs. I was the only person on the stairs and hundreds of people flooding past me going up the escalator. But we know this now, though. We know that it's better to take the stairs. So why am I the only one on the stairs?
But we have two parts of our brain, right? I don't know if you've read Daniel Kahneman's famous book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, but he's not the only person to argue this, but we have an instincts to save energy, right? It's like just like I have instincts you put chocolate cake in front of me, it's my instinct to go for the chocolate cake instead of the carrot, right? If there's also a carrot. So we have to use our slow brain to override our fast brain. We have to consciously make that decision, which is what you just told me, right? You thought about, you're meeting this exercise freak, so I better take the stairs.
What I thought.
And I'm the same way. And my office is on the 5th floor of a beautiful Victorian building at Harvard. It's quite a climb to get up to my floor. And if I take the elevator, I guess you call it the lift here, right? I'd be called a hypocrite. So I have no choice. I have to take the stairs. because of what I study. But every day I have this little debate with myself, and I have to override my instinct to take the lift because it's better for me to take the stairs, for not just for my health but also for my reputation. So it's just natural, right? And so we live in a world now where we no longer have to be physically active. And also a lot of the physical activity that people do isn't much fun. I mean, it's not fun to trudge up the stairs and the Chancery Lane, tube stop or whatever. So, or it's not, getting on a treadmill, right? Which is what a lot of people do, right? I mean, who enjoys running on a treadmill? Nobody. I mean, you can make the time pass if you're maybe listening to this podcast or something like that. But so we make it often very unfun, and we certainly make it unnecessary. And the result is that people are just normal. So we shouldn't blame and shame people for struggling to exercise. They're just normal, absolutely, completely normal human beings doing what we evolved to do.
Huel has been a staple of my diet for some time, and I'm currently loving these Huel Daily A to Z vitamins. Tastes great, refreshing. Each can has 26 vitamins and minerals, offering 154 science-backed health benefits. Reduced tiredness and fatigue, normal cognitive function, healthy skin, hair and nails, and vitamin D for immunity. This is a vitamin drink that offers everything you could need it to. So what are you waiting for? Grab it right now in Tesco stores nationwide or at Huel.com and let me know what you think.
So what does someone like you do differently then that means you get up and go for a run today? How have you got yourself to that place? Because I'm sure there are people going, great, I now know what I need to do, but my brain is still going to tell me why bother?
Well, I struggle just like everybody else. There's nothing special about me. So I find ways to make it either necessary or fun. So I sign up for races. Like I have a race coming up on April 15th, and if I don't train, I'll humiliate myself. So I better. So that's why here I am traveling, and I'm still running around, various places to try to stay fit. I also run with friends when I can. So arrange to meet friends, and then it's a social thing, right? So we meet at a certain place, and if I'm late, they're going to be irritated at me, and vice versa. So we kind of coerce each other socially to do. And then, of course, it's often early in the morning. We're kind of grumpy and whatever. But by the end of the run, we're usually, chatting and gossiping and having a good time. And usually I'm glad I did it.
Yeah. So make it fun rather than a necessity. I also love reading about the way that you talk about nudges and shoves.
Right.
Can we talk about those?
Sure. I mean, look, we can coerce people, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we do in school, right? I mean, children are required to do sports or some other kind of exercise, and we think that's okay, right? Because children can't make decisions for themselves. But for adults, we're not. You can't tell me what to do. I'm an adult, right? So what we need are help that would help, that we would agree to, right?
Right.
So help us help ourselves, right? And so we call those nudges, right? So putting the lift or the escalator kind of out of the way, so that it's easier to take the stairs rather than the escalator. That's a nudge, for example, or incentives or whatever. There are many forms of nudges, and we don't really use them very often, but we can and should use them more. And I think that gives people choice without coercion, and helps them do what they would actually like to do themselves.
What about a shove?
Shoves are just like hard nudges, right?
Okay.
Let me think. I mean, a shove might be, let's say your boss signs the entire team up for the counting team or whatever it is you do for some kind of race, right, to raise money for a charity, right? And then it's like you're not going to be the only one who's not going to go participate, right? So you're kind of forced to do it, right, in a kind of a socially, and maybe people do object to that sometimes, but that can be useful. So in the book, one of the things I did is I went to the Bjorn Borg company in Stockholm, because it's, as far as I know, still the only company in the world that requires all of its employees to exercise. The CEO is this exercise fanatic, and as far as he's concerned, if you want to work at his company on Fridays, it's fitness hour or sports hour, whatever, I can't remember what they call it. And the entire company, it doesn't matter who you are, you could be a board member, you could be somebody who sorts the mail, you could be the CEO, everybody goes and exercises together. And if you're visiting, you go too. And that's quite a shove.
And do you agree with it?
Well, I was kind of curious about it. So I emailed the company and said, can I come and see this? Because I was curious about it. And they invited me to go. And he said, and I was given free reign of the company. I could talk to anybody I wanted. There was like nobody minding me or watching me, listening to me, et cetera. And the vast majority of folks said, there were a few, of course, who were just like exercise fanatics already. And they loved the fact that they were, that everybody did this together. But there were some who also, did it a little bit begrudgingly, but we're kind of glad that they did it. And there's some who they told me, people who quit, when the company started doing this, there were people who had left the company because they're like, I'm not doing this. But I think for the most part, so the people who were still there appreciated it. They realized it was a good thing, because when you exercise together, you not only get the benefits of exercise, you also, it's a communal thing. You're having fun. It's like, look, there are forms of physical activity, which is, we don't always call all exercise physical activity, but that are communal, that every culture has done for millions of years, like dancing. And we've kind of stopped doing that in our culture, right? We just don't do that anymore.
Can you explain what actually physiologically happens to our bodies? Because I love these numbers. If you do exercise, you lower your risk of all-cause death by a huge amount. But I still don't really understand why. Like, what's actually happening to us?
So there are two ways in which exercise, or let's call it physical activity, because it can be working in the garden, right, which is, most people don't consider exercise, or going for a dance, right? But there are two ways in which physical activity are beneficial. So, and they all have to do with energy, right? So the first is that when I'm spending energy on physical activity, my body is allocating energy to that activity as opposed to other ways my body can spend energy, which are unhealthy.
Right.
So one of them is adding too much fat, right?
Yeah.
So fat is normal, right? We all need fat. Fat is sometimes unfairly demonized. And humans are unusually fat creatures. So most animals have about 4%, 5% body fat. We evolved to have 3 to 5 times that. Skinny people have 3 to 5 times more body fat than our closest relatives who are primates or most mammals. But and the reason fat is important for humans is that it's important for reproduction. We need fat to help make sure our brains always have energy. It's like money in the bank. We need to have fat to pay for our reproductive strategies. We need to have fat for all kinds of important reasons that it's been selected for in human evolution. So our bodies, unlike that of many other animals, or more so than other animals, whenever there's any extra energy, goes into fat. So that's one of the reasons why exercise or physical activity is so incredibly useful for preventing weight gain or weight regain. It's not great for losing weight, but it's phenomenal for preventing you from gaining weight. So exercise should always be part of any dieting strategy. The other thing that exercise does or physical activity does, is it affects hormone levels. So remember, what does natural selection care about?
Reproduction.
Exactly.
Babies.
How many babies you have, right? So when our bodies, when we stop being physically active, our bodies say, "Oh, there's extra energy," and hormone levels go up, especially in women. And in the second half of the menstrual cycle, what's called the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle, estrogen rises and especially progesterone rises. And those hormones, and they rise to unusually high levels,
right.
Levels that aren't necessary to get fertile, right? To get pregnant. Those higher hormone levels are what cause the higher levels of breast cancer in women, right? Because again, if you have all this extra energy, plow it into reproduction.
I think that's fascinating because I think that we all associate eating food with more fat, and then the more fat makes you iller. But actually what you're saying is the eating of the food gives you this kind of the opposite of a calorie deficit, whatever that word is. You'll probably know that rather than me, but you've got all this extra calories, all this extra energy, and your body's then increasing hormones in women, which is then...
Well, it's not just eating food, it's also not being physically active,
yeah.
Right? So both of them affect what we call energy balance. You can be either positive energy balance, which is you're gaining weight,
yeah.
or negative energy balance, you're losing weight. And most of us manage to, we're cycling back and forth and bike and forth. We stay pretty stable. When you're not spending energy on physical activity, like, again, I spent 500 calories this morning, running around Regent's Park for no reason whatsoever, right? That's energy. If I ate the same amount of food, I would just plow that into fat. I'm not female, so I wouldn't increase my progesterone levels, right? But anyway, the point is that both of those are unhealthy, right? Too much fat causes inflammation.
Yeah.
And inflammation is what causes pretty much every disease that most of us are concerned about. It causes heart disease, it causes diabetes, type 2 diabetes, it affects cancer rates, it affects Alzheimer's, it affects arthritis. I mean, the list is long and very, very, very scary, right? So too much fat, and we can talk about why that's the case, but that is, it becomes inflammatory, and inflammation just mucks up our body. And also levels of hormones that are too high increase rates of cancer. So that's one pathway by which exercise is good. Yeah. But the other one is that when I go for a run or you play a game of football or whatever it is that you do, right? You're stressing your body, right? You're causing physiological stress pretty much in every system of your body. You're causing, your mitochondria, which are the little organelles in every cell that provide the energy, right? They're like the battery packs of every cell, right? Those mitochondria, as they produce energy, they're just spewing out what we call reactive oxygen species. Those are molecules that have unpaired electrons and they're highly reactive. They cause basically, when your apple browns, if you just let it sit there, that's the same thing. It's oxidation of tissue. Right. So those little reactive oxygen species cause damage everywhere, right? So exercise actually creates this sort of storm of really unhealthy molecules that are just flooding your body, right? It causes DNA damage. It causes proteins to become what we call glycated. they get damaged by heat and by, sugars start attaching to them and gum them up. You create tears in your muscles. You create cracks in your bone. I could go on, right? I mean, every single system of your body pretty much is stressed by exercise. But our bodies also evolved to cope with that, right? So when we produce these reactive oxygen species, our cells produce antioxidants that mop that up. Our cells produce enzymes that repair our DNA, right? And keep the chromosomes from getting shortened and repair our muscles and repair our bones and keep our brains healthy. There are a gazillion of these proteins that we produce, and because two important things. One is that because we never evolved not to be physically active, we never evolved to turn these mechanisms on in the absence of physical activity as much. And then secondly, they always overshoot, right? Because you don't want to, if you created all this stuff and you didn't mop up all the damage, you'd die younger if you were physically active, right? And we know that's not the case, right? So I often say it's like spilling coffee, right? If I were to spill coffee on this table and then I cleaned it up, right? The table would actually be cleaner than before I spilled the coffee. Not that the table looks all that dirty, right? And it's the same thing in your body, right? You overshoot the damage repair, and the result is that you have maintenance and repair and also remodeling that repair your DNA and keep your chromosomes from getting too short and keep your muscles from atrophying and the list goes on forever. Your brain, from the neurons in your brain from getting clogged up. We produce a factor called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor. It's actually produced by your muscles in vast quantities when you're exercising, when you're physically active.
What does that do?
It's like a colleague of mine calls it miracle grow for the brain. It's actually causes new neurons to grow in the brain, and it actually repairs and keeps the synapses in your brain from getting damaged. It's probably one of the major reasons why exercise is by far an order of magnitude more potent for preventing Alzheimer's and dementia than any other known thing you can possibly do in your life, right? Because you're producing these molecules that help you. Another thing that we study in my lab is a molecule called IL-6, interleukin 6. We all heard about this during the COVID, right? Remember the cytokine storm? So cytokines are molecules that turn on your immune system, right? Yeah. So it turns out that we always knew that these molecules were produced by our blood cells, our white blood cells, but they're also actually produced by your muscle. And when you're active, and I have a lot more muscle in my body than I have white blood cells. So when I go for that run in the morning, I produce this prodigious quantity of IL-6, which at low levels is inflammatory, but at high levels turns off inflammation. So that's one of the reasons why people who exercise have lower levels of inflammation, because their muscles are shutting down that system, keeping us from getting damaged. So there's a gazillion repair and maintenance and remodeling mechanisms that are incredibly beneficial, and because we evolved to be physically active, but we don't turn them on in the absence of physical activity because we never evolved not to be physically active. There's no time in human history until very recently when you could just sit around all day in a chair and just do nothing. You had to go out and be active. The average hunter-gatherer walks 9 to 15 kilometers every single day. Every single day. There's no holidays, there's no weekends, there's no retirement. To put it into practical terms, a typical hunter-gatherer would walk from Los Angeles to New York City every year.
So we've got a body designed for a very different world.
That's right. So we call this a mismatch. We're mismatched to being inactive. Our bodies never evolved to be inactive. And so as a result, we don't turn on all these mechanisms that keep us healthy. And so what we do is we get sick if we're inactive, and we go to the doctor and we get pills and various other sorts of treatments to keep us going. But what exercise does is it increases what we call your health span, right? The amount of the years that you live without any disease or disability. So people today are living longer than before, that's for sure. Although not that much longer actually than hunter-gatherers. But they're also living more and more years with disabilities. So the average American now lives to be 78, but the last 16 years of their lives are spent on average, this is average, so many people have more, with some serious kind of chronic disability. And most of those disabilities would be prevented to some extent if not to a large extent, by having been more physically active earlier in their lives.
I guess one of the toughest challenges, right, is that I'm 45. So if I listen to this conversation, I probably think, well, like my knees are a bit sore. I can't bounce out of bed like I used to. I can't play on the play area with the kids like I could when they were first born 7 or 8 years ago. But apart from that, I'm okay. I mean, what we're really asking people to do, which I guess is a challenge, is to do the work now with the rewards in the future.
To some extent, yes. So you're doing what we call hyperbolic discounting, right? You're choosing to do something now because you'll get benefit in the future. But it's also true that it's not like you like if you exercise now, you're going to live to be 100 later. You have to keep doing it. So we call this the active grandparent hypothesis. So humans are unusual in that we evolved to live after we stop reproducing. So most animals, right, as soon as they stop having babies, natural selection doesn't care about them at all, right? Yeah. They're just gone, right? But humans are different. A typical hunter-gatherer will live about 2 decades at least after they stop reproducing. And but they're not just like retiring and going to, Florida or whatever, where the south of Spain or whatever it is you're doing when you retire, or sitting back and just watching the television. They're still active, right? They're still hunting, they're still gathering. And then that physical activity turns on all those repair and maintenance mechanisms, which keeps people healthy. So the trick is not to just, think, well, I exercise when I'm young and that'll keep me healthy when I'm older, is to continue to stay physically active as you age. And there's plenty of epidemiological data that supports this. There are studies which show that as people age, the benefits of exercise actually become bigger, not smaller, in terms of their long-term health.
Because my dad says to me I've never seen my dad go to the gym, and he now says to me, he's 76. He either says, it's too late for me to be doing this, or
not true.
Exercise is for young people.
Not true. Absolutely not true. Quite the reverse.
So what would it do to his body then if he started to exercise?
Well, I mean, I'm not a gerontologist, so I'm not an expert on. And furthermore, everybody's a bit different in terms of what their health issues are and their fitness levels are. But the benefits are the same for everybody. When you're physically active, you start pumping blood around your body. You turn on all these proteins.
But why is it more for him then? Why would it be more beneficial for him?
Well, because as we age, senescence starts to catch up with us. Aging is as the years tick by, right? Yeah. Senescence is the deterioration that is correlated with age. And what exercise does is it slows senescence. So like one of the big problems that people run into as they age in our society is the muscle wasting. The technical term is sarcopenia. Sarco means flesh in Greek, and penia means loss, so flesh loss. It kind of sounds awful, right? It does. But sarcopenia is what happens when people get old and they get frail and they can't do stuff, right? So it gets hard to, get off the toilet or get out of a chair. It gets hard to lift your bags. And, everything becomes a little bit more difficult. And when that happens, a vicious cycle sets in, because then you do less of those things and you become even more frail. And we all have seen this, people, elderly individuals who really struggle to do basic things, and their bodies deteriorate at a rapid rate. You can, it's not causal, it's correlative, but the speed at which people walk is very predictive of how long they're going to live as they age, right? And it's not because walking fast is like necessarily all that great for you. It's just a good signpost it's an indicator of how much your body is deteriorating. So as people age, staying physically active slows the rate at which all the systems in their body senesce, and it helps them stay active and healthy and helps them stay mentally alert. It slows dementia, it slows heart disease, it slows metabolic disease. I mean, I don't even know where to stop the list.
Yeah.
Hey guys, do you want £350 off the latest generation 8 Sleep Pod 4 Ultra? It's a pod added to your existing mattress, proven to give you up to 1 hour more quality sleep every night. It's used by sports people, it's used by titans of industry, it's even used by me. And there's nothing else like it on the market. It heats, it cools, it adjusts, and it uses sensors to track your sleep with 99% tracking accuracy. Sleeping on the pod for just 1 week can improve your cardiovascular health as much as 12 weeks of strength training. So to get £350 off the latest generation 8 Sleep Pod 4 Ultra, just go to 8sleep.com/HPP. That's 8sleep.com/HPP.
Can we talk about the mental impacts as well as the physical ones?
Sure.
I'm a big advocate for mental health, particularly in young men. But I now see among my parents as they get older and their friends, the prevalence of people having mental health challenges much later in life, having never had a real issue with it when life was busy, when they had children and they had purpose and they had a job and all these things. So I'd love to talk about the impact of exercise.
Yeah, it's actually, I think, one of the most compelling reasons to help people, to help motivate people, because, especially when you're young, but also as you age, when you're 20, you think, okay, it doesn't matter. But exercise when you're 20 can have huge effects, for example, on depression. So when you're physically active, you produce all kinds of neurotransmitters, right? I produce dopamine, which is the molecule that basically says, do it again, right? I produce serotonin, which is important for regulating mood and anxiety and frustration and anger. I produce, I guess we call it epinephrine. I think you call it adrenaline here in England, right? Which, again, makes you kind of more active. I produce brain-derived neurotropic growth factor, which produces more neurons in my brain. It keeps my brain growing. I produce opioids, right? Which would be illegal. Oh, absolutely. You're producing all kinds of endogenous opioids, which it's one of the reasons why, you can run, like I don't know if you ever run a marathon or anything like that, but I've sometimes, run long races like marathons, and I feel, at the end of the race, suddenly my feet, like I realize I have a blister the size of, New York City.
Oh, but you've never felt it when you...
I didn't feel it because the opioids were just making my brain happy, right? You produce endocannabinoids, which is the same stuff when you smoke cannabis, right? It gives you runner's high, right? In fact, the first time I ran the London Marathon once, and I remember, I was just running it for fun. I wasn't, racing, and I had just a grand time. I had a wonderful time. I remember as I ran by Big Ben right towards the finish, I remember thinking, wow, Big Ben is so big. And I realized I'm high, right?
Because Big Ben actually isn't that big, is it?
But Big Ben looks really, because when you're high, right, everything is like exaggerated, right? White is whiter and blue is bluer and the birds are tweetier and Big Ben is bigger and whatever. But the point is that your brain produces this cocktail of molecules that make you feel good. We have data, right? There are, I don't know how many, there are at least, we just did a big study in our lab, but a meta-analysis, but there are dozens, maybe many dozens of studies, prospective gold standard studies where they take a group of individuals who are all clinically diagnosed with major depressive disorder, right? So these are people who are struggling, right? And half of them are assigned to exercise, and then half of them are assigned some kind of pharmaceutical, right? And in almost all of the studies, the exercise has more of an effect than taking a pharmaceutical. And we actually understand them. So we have data that tells us the prevalence of the effectiveness. Yeah. We also have data which tells us the mechanisms. We understand some of the molecular mechanisms. The self-medication that occurs, right? So we know that this is very potent effects, and yet how often when somebody goes in to see a counselor or a psychiatrist, often nobody even asks whether they're being physically active. They don't ask whether they're exercising, and it's just a failure of our medical system, our medical systems, to recognize just how important physical activity is for so many aspects of our body. But again, let's be careful, right? Let's not sell this as a. I think I'm overdoing this in a way. It's not a magic bullet, right? It doesn't mean that everybody who gets depression will instantly have their depression gone. It increases your exercise decreases your vulnerability. It can help, but it's not like a magic bullet. But it helps. Just there are no magic bullets. People who exercise also still die, But it is one of the most potent ways to reduce your vulnerability to a wide range of diseases, and in many cases helps you. It can also help treat a number of diseases.
I think one of the other challenges is
just how busy we all are. I was thinking about this conversation because I went to a party on Saturday night, and the conversation I kept having repeated itself. How are you? Oh, I've got so much going on at the moment. What are you doing at the moment? Oh, I've hardly got time to go to the bathroom at the moment. I'm so busy. There is this real disconnect, isn't there, between feeling that we have to be pushing ourselves all of the time and finding the opportunity to do the things that we know are good for us.
Yeah, I mean, it is an issue. I mean, it's also a question of priority.
Yeah.
And how we evaluate our priorities. And again, I'm often too busy to, and I want to make those excuses, but then I find ways to force myself because A, it's my job, and I don't want to be a hypocrite.
Yeah.
But B, I've decided as I get older that there are two things I just don't like to compromise on, and one is sleep, and the other is exercise. I just, it's they're important to me, and I'm just not and also when I'm not exercising, I'm not doing the right thing by my family as well. So, but I think everybody who does that probably could think about how they could adjust other things they do in their lives. But if you're commuting and you have kids and whatever, yeah, it is tough. There's no question about it, because we live in a world where not only is physical activity unnecessary, sometimes you have to go out of your way to do it.
That's one of the challenges. It's hard to know what to say to people who already feel like they're operating at 100%. And I wonder whether for them it's reducing stress. I mean, stress obviously is a huge factor, right, when it comes to longevity and health.
Yeah. And of course, physical activity does reduce stress. There's no question about it. I think everybody knows that. Right?
Yeah.
Going for a walk, everybody knows going for a walk outside, even on a gray, rainy day, is better than not going for a walk, right? So, yeah, I don't have a simple answer to that one, obviously, but we also, I think as a society, we need to find ways, and as friends and neighbors and whatever, to help each other. Again, we evolved to be physically active for two reasons, and two reasons only, right? When it's necessary or when it's rewarding. So we have to help either make it necessary and rewarding. Yeah. And there are many ways to do that, but there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Can we talk then about the power of being sedentary? You've just said that sleep is really important for you. Can you tell us, first of all, what you've done to make sure that you prioritize sleep and get the right sleep that works for you?
Well, actually, interesting. We're all told that we, 8 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah.
That's just not true, actually. And but if you look at epidemiological data, again, large samples, right, where you graph how much sleep you get a night and how long you live, it's a U-shaped curve. So people who don't get much sleep, they do run into trouble. There's no question about that. People who sleep too much also run into trouble. That's usually because there's something wrong that's making them sleep too much. But the bottom of the curve for almost everybody, for most populations, and then there's variation, everybody's different, so you might be different from me, is about 7 hours. So it turns out that 7 hours is, if you want to say an optimum, bottom of that curve, 7 hours turns out to be the optimum. Furthermore, if you look in and we think, modern world, we have iPhones and television and electric lights and all that, and that's ruined sleep, right? Edison, ruined sleep, yeah. Right? Populations which have none of these things, right? There's no electricity, no iPhones or whatever. They sleep less than 7 hours on average. Like the hunter-gatherers sleep 6.5 hours.
Is that right?
They don't nap either, for the most part. And some of them are early risers, and some of them are night owls and whatever. And there's always somebody awake making noise in camp, etc. But it turns out that the idea that we evolved to sleep 8 hours is a bit of an exaggeration. And that what happens though is that what I call the sleep industrial complex. But there are people who out there to make money off this, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're not getting enough sleep, so buy this product, buy this, this strip you can put on your nose, pills, of course, which are terrible for you. I mean, hypnotic. The pills that sleeping pills are really bad for you. And then we this mattress, or you have to get a special curtains to block out every photon of light or whatever. Because we're making people stressed about sleep, but guess what stress does? Stress prevents you from sleeping. So the more we make people stressed about their sleep, the less well they're going to sleep, and it just drives a vicious circle, and then the more they're going to go and run and buy your product. So we just, yes, too little sleep is a problem. People who don't get enough sleep we need to find ways to help them. But making people anxious about sleep is, I think, exactly the wrong way to help them sleep.
I find if I wake up in the night, the one thing that stops me getting back to sleep is the fear of not getting back to sleep.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And they like, oh my God, something's wrong. I woke up in the middle of the night. But everybody wakes up in the middle of the night sometimes. It's completely normal. But if you're less worried about it, your cortisol levels won't rise and prevent you from sleeping, because cortisol is an arousal hormone, right? When you're stressed, so cortisol doesn't cause you to be stressed. Cortisol comes up when you are stressed. When I'm teaching, I actually showed this wonderful experiment where they had a bunch of people jump out of airplanes, and you can measure cortisol in saliva. So they had them spit in little tubes as they were getting in the airplane and about to jump out. And of course, the first time they jumped out, their cortisol levels were literally sky high, right? They're like, oh my God, I'm going to jump out of an airplane. They're really high cortisol levels. And then what they did is then, like every week, they repeated the jump, right? And by 7 weeks, there was like no cortisol, right? They're still jumping from the same height, but they were no longer stressed because they're like now, oh yeah, I'm going to jump out of a plane again. So, but cortisol, turns on your fight and flight mechanisms, right? It makes you, help you run away from the lion or whatever. And all of that prevents you from sleeping. So, the trick to helping people sleep is to help them avoid stress.
And on a similar note, talking about sleep and getting the right rest and recovery, I have a few friends, when I talk to them about exercise, they say, well, I'm just too tired. And I often say to them, if you start exercising, I bet you'll be less tired.
This is true.
Is it true?
Yes, because exercise, there's different kinds of fatigue, right? So one kind of fatigue is the fatigue from, I did a really long run this weekend, right? And I was tired afterwards. That's because I ran a ridiculous number of miles, right? But that's kind of but there's the other fatigue, which is sort of more kind of a malaise, that kind of, just feeling lack of energy and all that kind of stuff. But exercise, of course, liberates all that energy. It turns on, your endorphins, and it turns on growth hormone, GH, which gives you this energy surge. Again, this is part of the issue, right? Which is that we didn't evolve to say, oh, I feel awful. I think I'm going to go for a run.
Yeah.
Nobody in the Paleolithic ever did that, right? They didn't think, oh God, I feel awful. I'm going to go for a pointless 5-mile run. Nobody did that, right? The reason they went out and were physically active was they were hungry, right? Or their children were hungry, or their friends were hungry, and they had to go get food, and they had to, do something, right? So they never, it was never a prescription for feeling bad. It was just a necessity, right?
So are you optimistic or pessimistic about our future when it comes to exercise and fitness and health and wellness? Because social media has exploded in the last few years. So we can spend hours not leaving the sofa. We can click one button now and have our lovely food that's highly calorific delivered to our front door. And it was only when we were younger that you'd have to actually at least walk to the takeaway, right, to get yourself a kebab. Now you don't even have to walk anywhere. I kind of feel like, we've got businesses spending billions of pounds to try and convince us to eat their refined food. It feels like society is stacked so heavily against us. So many billions of pounds are being spent for these businesses to be successful. It's bloody hard for us as individuals to kind of almost find our way through and remind ourselves what we really should be doing.
This is true. So I do most of my field work in Africa, where we're talking about the industrialized Western world, which is actually a small percentage of the world's population. Right now, this transition is occurring rapidly everywhere around the world. Right, in the area in Kenya where I've been working for many years, right, diabetes is the fastest growing disease. Right. Obesity is rising. People are moving to the cities. They've got mopeds and bicycles and cars, and there's more, of course, as you say, ultra processed foods, and if we can't afford it, how do you think poor countries in the global South are going to afford this? They can't, right? It's a growing crisis. So I'm deeply concerned about this, because it's not just in America and UK and Europe, et cetera. This is happening really fast all over the planet, and we need to act. And the way to do that is through some combination of public health messaging, but also I think we're going to have to maybe start thinking about regulation. We don't like to regulate things and force people to do things, but it is true that there are a lot of companies out there that are making a lot of money by making us sick because they're giving us what we want. And on the one hand, we say, well, they're not forcing us to buy these products. But on the other hand, people don't understand the products. And so I think we need, as a society, to ask ourselves, how we want to help regulate the world, right? To help people help themselves. Should we tax them? Should we force them to, put labels on their foods just the way we have them for tobacco? We also need to push more for physical education for kids, for exercise in schools, because the habits people develop when they're young are important as they get older. We need to do more public education. So it used to be that people who were wealthy were overweight and unfit, and people who were the working poor, they're the ones who were very physically active and they were and they were thin. Now it's the reverse, right? Now people who have means can afford to go to gyms and they can afford to buy really healthy food, and people who are struggling have to commute long distances and they have multiple jobs and they don't have time to exercise, and they, if you go to a marathon, you're going to see a lot of rich people. Or if you go to an Ironman, I've been to Ironman a few times in Kona. I didn't run them, by the way. I was there in the medical tent. They're millionaires mostly. These are really, really, really rich people who've made $1 gazillion or pounds or whatever, and then probably saw their doctor who said, you're about to die because all you've been doing is making money, you're sitting in the chair. And so they took the same intensity that they used for becoming super wealthy and to becoming super fit. Right. And so, to get to Kona, you have to spend thousands of dollars to get there. You buy a 20,000 pound bike. And, these are wealthy people. There's nothing wrong with it. Right. I'm not opposed to it. But these are mostly very wealthy people who have the time to train for a full Ironman. Is a ridiculous amount of time. Most people can't do that. Right.
There's big challenges ahead. Before we move on to our quickfire questions, just a few things that I just want to cover off with you. Just a reminder to people who've heard this fascinating conversation, how much of illness is preventable by us just making a small change?
So according to the Center for Disease Control in the United States, which had taken a few hits recently, they're dealing with COVID, but nonetheless, according to the CDC, 75% of the time when somebody walks into a doctor's office, it's for a disease that's technically classified as preventable. 75% of the time. And furthermore, we also know from many studies that our medical care pretty much affects about 10% of people's healthcare outcomes. It's actually pretty good. So in the United States, we're spending 20% of our GDP on diseases, 75% of which are preventable, to affect 10% of people's healthcare outcomes. It's completely stupid, right? It makes absolutely no sense. If we got people to exercise more and also eat healthier, and we could eliminate a large, people are still going to die, of course. We're all going to die of something. But we could reduce people's disability and chronic diseases and increase their quality of life enormously.
And to that end, from people who've been impacted by this conversation, what's the first thing, the most valuable thing that they can do after listening to this that will make a difference?
Just recognize that you don't have to run a marathon or swim the English Channel or whatever. Just anything is better than nothing. And just build up slowly and gradually, but also make it fun. If you don't like to exercise, arrange to go for a walk with a friend. That's not exercise, it's just nice. Go dancing with somebody you find worth dancing with. Do something that's fun, right? And then, before you know it, you'll enjoy it more. And then it becomes more positive, and it becoming a negative thing, it becomes more of a positive thing. And then you can increase it. And just a few minutes a day is better than no minutes a day. And it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
We've spoken a lot about exercise. What have you learned about diet?
Oh my gosh, that would take a very, very long conversation.
You can give us a few minutes on it. Not everything. But if you were to sit down with your wife and she would say, come on, Daniel, what have you learned that we can bring into the family today? What would you say?
Well, I would say that, again, there are a lot of people out there, many of them quacks, some of them intentionally quacks, some of them self-deceived quacks, who are trying to tell us what the optimal diet is. And just like there's no optimal exercise, let me tell you, there is no optimal diet, despite what people claim. Right? Humans evolved to eat anything. You can be an Inuit and live on meat, and you can be a vegan and live, not even eat any dairy. neither necessarily they're going to make you super healthy, but you can. Our bodies evolved to eat pretty much anything, and we also never evolved to diet. We never evolved to lose weight, and so again, just like with exercise, there's a lot of useful information we can get from taking an evolutionary perspective to diet, but it's a long and complicated story.
We'll have another conversation one time about diet, but I think it's a good message for people who are struggling with diet and struggling to lose weight, that their body's not designed to do that.
Hey, I just wanted to dive in and say we're so proud to be working with Manual on today's episode. And I'm so pleased to be joined by Manual's testosterone replacement therapy doctor, Dr. Manny. So what's going on when it comes to men and testosterone?
About 1 in 4 men have low testosterone or are experiencing symptoms of low testosterone. Low sex drive, erectile dysfunction, low energy levels, low mood or anxiety.
And how important is it, you think, if someone thinks they might have a problem, for them to get in touch?
The simple thing to do is one of the finger prick blood tests that you do at home. You send it back to us. We can then find out if you have actual low testosterone on blood tests.
What does treatment look like?
Treatment can either be with injections or with creams or gels that you put onto the skin. So those are the ways that we can replace testosterone.
If you would like to know more, or maybe you're thinking that maybe you might have low testosterone, then all you need to do is hit the link in the description to this show and use the code HP45 for 45% off your first at-home testosterone blood test.
Absolutely, your body has to counter vast numbers of adaptations that it has to hold on to weight. So if you think it's hard to diet, it's because it really is hard to diet.
And I love your kind of clear but all-encompassing message that there is no perfection, there is no golden bullet, there is no one thing you need to do. Are you frustrated that we live in a world where that feels to be really prevalent now?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's how you make money, right? I could make way more money if I had a book with 7 steps to be super healthy. I could just make them up, right? People do that all the time, right? And because we want simple answers to complex problems. And the problem is that many problems are complex and they defy simple answers. But that's not what people want to hear.
And why is it important to you then not to go down that clickbait route?
Because I believe in telling the truth.
Brilliant. Right. Are you ready for some quick fire questions?
Sure.
So the first one is, what are the 3 most important non-negotiable behaviours to you? Things that you or people around you must bring to the table.
I really dislike it when people are dishonest. I really dislike it when people are mean. And also close-minded.
Right. Very good. What's your biggest strength? What's your greatest weakness?
I have no idea what my biggest strength is. I think it's because I don't know. I'm very fortunate. I get to do what I love to do, and I think maybe my biggest strength is also my biggest weakness is that I get really obsessed by what I'm interested in. So that can be a good thing, and it can also be a bad thing.
And what are you obsessed about at the moment?
Oh, right now? Actually, I'm working a book. I'm trying to do a kind of a sequel to exercise. I'm writing a book about diet, and I've become, partly to help educate myself, but also because I teach, anatomy and physiology and nutrition and digestion, and I've become really obsessed with the research I'm doing on this book, and driving my wife crazy.
What would you say to a teenage Daniel just starting out on this journey?
Oh, wow. It's funny. I mean, life has taken all kinds of interesting courses, but it's funny. I was just asked this question the other night. I was having dinner with a colleague in Oxford, and he brought along some students. And I said, prepare for your midlife crisis, right? Because as you get older, right, you're going to ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing, right? Is it really worth all the effort and energy I poured into it, right? Because it's going to happen at some point in your life. And if you start thinking now about doing something that really will provide lifelong value and make the world a better place, now's the time to think about it so that you don't run into this problem later on.
That is brilliant. If you could go back to one moment in your life, where would you go and why?
I wouldn't. I don't believe in regret. It's a very unhelpful emotion. I mean, I've had a very lucky life so far. I mean, there have been tough times, just like with everybody else. But I mean, I've had a fantastic journey so far. I mean, I've got a wonderful wife and a great kid and a great job, and I've been able to travel to all kinds of wonderful places. And you know, being a scientist and professor at a great university has been an incredible privilege. You know, there have been struggles and difficulties, but I don't believe in regret. It's not a very healthy way of thinking about things.
Final question, and thank you very much for the time you've given us. What would you leave us thinking about as your one golden rule to living a high-performance life?
Remember that the world that we live in today, with all its wonderful things and also challenging things, is not the world in which we evolved, right? And we are, and we have to, and that the Western, you know, industrialized world that many of us live in is not the world that most people live in. And the world that you think of, your life that you may think is normal, right? You may think it's normal to get in a metal tube and fly through the air, and you may think it's normal to eat breakfast cereal from a box, and you may think it's normal to you know, wear shoes and all that. None of that's normal from an evolutionary perspective. It doesn't mean it's bad or good, but it means that we are often mismatched to the world that we live in, and we have to we have to be conscious and careful and thoughtful about the choices that we make and the world that we live in, because it has all kinds of effects.
It's brilliant. And look, thank you so much. And I think it's a really good reminder for all of us that, of course, it is normal to us because it's our lived experience, right? But actually, for you to come on here and share with us that, you know, we're not in this moment. We weren't created the moment we were born, right? There is so many years of evolutionary history behind us that impacts how challenging life can be.
There's an old expression. It's actually a title of an essay, but nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution, right? Because we weren't engineered, we weren't designed, we evolved. And that's, if you understand why we are the way we are, you have to understand that evolutionary history. In fact, you could say that nothing makes sense except in the light of evolution. It doesn't have to be in biology, right?
Yeah.
And so that evolutionary history, that story of how we got to be the way we are, helps explain why we are the way we are. And that why helps us answer a lot of important questions.
Well, it's been really helpful. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.